I just got done watching the Resident Evil TV show on Netflix, and we're just going to try and make this video as short and sweet as possible. Is the TV series worth watching? No. No, it's not. It's not good enough to justify the 8 hours it takes to watch the whole thing. Just going over a few things here. The acting is good, and there's some cool fight scenes later on that I'll get to. But for the most part, what I didn't really understand going into this TV show is that it is around 50% adults fighting zombies and 50% two 14-year-old girls talking to each other and trying to figure out if one of them is going to become a zombie. I do say 50%, but it certainly feels like much more of the show is centered around these two girls hanging around and like mucking about the suburbs trying to figure out this whole is one of them infected or not situation than the other post-apocalyptic story that's going on. And that's the big problem I think a lot of people have, is a lot of people sign up for Resident Evil to watch people fight zombies and monsters. This TV show spends a lot of time dealing with greedy corporations and two teenage girls fucking around, which just isn't the Resident Evil brand, so I'm really confused why they chose to make that show in that direction. So, a few things I've seen people get upset about is the idea that the show has nothing to do with the games. And I'm not really in the camp where that's a problem. I do question why anybody would want to make a Resident Evil show if they aren't going to have anything associated with Resident Evil in it. I read this one article that said, Resident Evil 7 and 8 proved that you don't have to have things be related to STARS and Raccoon City and Wesker and Redfield. And I agree, you don't. But Resident Evil is a survival horror game. It is a series based off of B-horror movies. And this TV show is nothing. It has nothing to do with Resident Evil. It has nothing to do with Resident Evil. It has nothing to do with survival. It has nothing to do with horror. And it has nothing to do with B-horror movies. So that's kind of where I'm at, right? At no point is there anybody like struggling to get a couple bits of ammo and resources to like plunder on ahead through an army of zombies or even just handle a few zombies. Every situation the main character is in, she gets out of easily without any injury or sacrifice. There's no real horror. There are horror monsters. There's zombies and giant monster creatures, and that's cool. But there's nothing that's ever filmed like a horror scene. There's no suspension. There's no tension. So it's not really horror either. And on top of that, it doesn't have anything similar to a Resident Evil game in terms of campiness or style. Despite what clips on the internet try to make you think, this show wants to be taken 100% seriously. And in that super seriousness, it tries to be also kind of weirdly grounded at times, and the show just doesn't work tonally. It makes it really boring. It makes it really dull. It doesn't have anything special about it. It is essentially a bad zombie TV series from like 2012 trying to capitalize on the zombie hype. And with that, we're going to get into spoilers now. So spoil warning, whatever. Who honestly gives a shit? The show is about Jade and Billy Wesker, who are the daughters of Albert Wesker. Albert Wesker being probably the most famous antagonist of Resident Evil. So the show is split into two halves that are constantly interlocking and intermingling between each other. One half is set in 2022, where the girls Billy and Jade are 14, and Billy gets bitten by a zombie dog and is becoming infected. The other half takes place in like 2036, I believe. It takes place like sometime in the future where they're all adults and the world has been overrun by zombies. And Jade is trying to find a cure while being pursued by Umbrella. Going back to why everything they say is boring, is they try to have stuff like when they're 14, like, oh, are we going to make it through this? Are we going to survive? And it's like, yeah, I know you all survive. You know what I mean? And then in the future, sometimes they'll just tell you shit that happens in the past. So it's not a big deal when somebody shows up. There's no surprise. I want to talk about Wesker, though, and the idea here that I was actually on board with. Like I said, I'm open to a lot of media changes. Not everything has to be by the book. Wesker isn't the super global saturation villain in this show. Instead, he's kind of like a work dad. And I liked that. I thought that was fine or whatever, because in my headcanon, what I thought was going to happen was Billy's infected, Wesker's going to lab her, scientific experiment her or whatever, and she, when she grows up in the future timeline, she's going to grow up to be the Wesker from the video games. But that's not exactly what happens in the show. The show takes a much stupider turn, where Wesker actually is a clone of the video game Wesker. Like, the actual video game Wesker shows up, and he has 3 clones that are all named Albert Wesker, and this guy is one of the clones. Like, literally the video game guy. They even say he dies in a volcano. It's insane. And Billy grows up to be the other villain, if not the main antagonist of the show, who is Evelyn? I don't care. She's the CEO, basically, of Umbrella. And she's kind of this smarmy, smirky, evil CEO lady. And all she really does is say something shitty and then, like, leave. Like, a lot of, like, real snarky shittiness that's fine for a villain to have. But again, none of these characters change. They are very much the exact same character from episode 1 to the end of episode 8. There is zero progression. No lessons are learned. No motivations are swapped. They're very, very similar, with the exception of Billy. But I guess that's kind of the whole point of the show, is that Billy switches between being some scared, awkward girl to becoming like an evil CEO, which is what happens. Billy doesn't turn into evil Wesker. She turns into evil Evelyn. She becomes the CEO lady. It's a weird decision. The show also is full of a lot of different Resident Evil references. You have, like, I'm the master of unlocking, and then you have, like, the giant alligator from 2, the chainsaw guy from 4 and 5, and even Lisa Trevor makes a return. If I had to really honestly say, if you wanted to watch something related to Resident Evil, what would I recommend? Would I recommend watching the Resident Evil TV show or Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City? I would personally pick Welcome to Raccoon City. They are essentially of equal quality. Both shows involve, like, twins with mysterious father figures and child experimentation, and, you know, it's like a really slow build up in the beginning where not a lot happens, and then both have a couple cool action sequences, and both are just littered with random Resident Evil references that make you go, like, oh, I recognize that, and oh, I know that name, but, like, they have nothing really to do with the story. The main difference is Resident Evil, the TV show, is 8 hours long, and Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City is 1 hour and 40 minutes. One of them is way more tolerable because you're only going to be bored for around 40 minutes to an hour before things start happening, no matter how stupid and bad those things are, as opposed to the TV show, where the show is almost always boring because there's an insane amount of talking and only a handful of action sequences. And I'll give the show this: those action sequences can be really cool at times. They can be. They not always are. They can be. Alright, so spoilers over. Here's the spoiler-free conclusion. Yeah. If you start watching the TV show and you're like, man, I really like these 14-year-olds and all of their dialogue, then keep watching the show. You're gonna like it. If you watch the first episode and you go, wow, I can't stand these 14-year-olds, stop watching. It will not get any better. The handful of action sequences, the literal 3 action sequences that are good, are not worth the 8-hour time investment. They're not that good. I mean, hey, if you want to watch a really good movie that captures all of the fun and horror and, like, action and suspense of Resident Evil, just watch Overlord. That's a great movie, and it's basically Resident Evil. With that, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one, And maybe the next time I do one of these little web camera reviews, it will be about a good video game property that I enjoyed watching. All right. Thanks a lot. Take it easy. Bye-bye. 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 Bye.